I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Tabitha Enoch, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm excited to be with y'all today. I serve as an Associate Dean of Students here at the university, and the core of my work is in orientation and new student programs. I get to work with our first gen and low income students. I get to work with our student veterans. I also do some diversity and inclusion work around UVA. But the most important thing that I get to do is I get to be the hype girl for the university. I tell people this all the time, that nobody calls me that, but I still use that. And today I'm utilizing my hype girl skills because I am the host for this event, your Zoom DJ, if you will. If I had music, I would be bumping some music for you right now. So I am going to be passing the mic to all of our presenters over the course of the day. I do want to start though quickly with just a land acknowledgement, because we always like to start with that just before we begin any programs. And so I'd like to take a moment to pause and acknowledge the land on which I stand. I don't know where you're logging in from, but I encourage you also to pause and reflect on the land where you are standing today. I know where I'm standing today, specifically here in Charlottesville, has long served as the site of the meeting and exchange of ideas amongst Native and Indigenous people, specifically the Monacan Nation, as we think about where we are here in Virginia. We honor and respect the Indigenous peoples connected to this territory on which I stand today, and encourage you to think about where you're standing today as well. To recognize the lands is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those on whose territory we reside, a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. So we want to acknowledge the land today. So before we get started, a couple of logistical things. The event is being recorded, so they got me on the spotlight. Thank the Lord I curled my hair today. Goodness gracious, I told my team, this is the only reason why I curled my hair. I didn't put my eyelashes on because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to take them off, but you got my fancy glasses here today. A few of our presenters might be asking you for audience input. Yes, even on Zoom, they want you to participate. It's unfair that I can't see you, but that you can see me. So, but just be aware, we still want a little bit of engagement. We're gonna start today with a robust conversation about motivation. And then we're gonna finish up the day, followed by some short mini TED Talks on a variety of different topics. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. It is a new year, right? A new year. And how many of you all are like me? You're like, new year, new me, out with the old, in with the new. 2020 is past, 2021, this is where I'm at, right? And so I am in that space today as well. I have recommitted once again to my Weight Watchers lifestyle. I'm not donating to them anymore. I'm actually going to practice what I'm supposed to be doing this year. I'm recommitting. Some of you may be thinking about that in terms of physical activity or studying, and you've done this before, and then 2 weeks into the semester, you're sort of back to your 2020 self or your 2019 self, and you wonder, what is going on? Why am I not motivated? Like, I want this thing so badly, but I'm still not motivated. So to get us started today, we're going to hear a conversation about how motivation actually works, why it's so hard to stay motivated lately, and get some tips for reconnecting you with your goals and your sense of purpose this spring. Listen, this is a talk we all need. I can't wait to hear what the people are going to say, because I need this. Lee Williams and Chris Hulleman both work in the Motivate Lab in the School of Education and Human Development. And who knew we had this? I've been at the university longer than many of you all on this call have been alive, but we have the Motivate Lab. Lee is a PhD student who earned his bachelor's degree in education and psychology at UVA just a few years ago in 2018. Professor Chris Hulleman is the director and founder of the Motivate Lab, and his research focuses on how purpose and motivation impact learning, right? So how purpose and motivation impact learning. They're gonna speak with one of my favorites here at UVA, Barb Zunder. One of my favorites. She directs the Student Disability Access Center and has years of experience in helping students navigate college life. So with that, I am going to pass the mic over to our wonderful panelists. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Tab. I feel hyped up from that. So thank you so much for that introduction. And I also, before we begin, just want to highlight too that we do have some closed captioning available for those that might need some communication access. I can't be the director of the Student Disability Access Center and not point that out. Now, that said, I am so excited to be here today with Lee and Chris and talk about this important topic. Our session is titled, "Why is this so hard?" And I think we all have experienced something along these lines as we've dealt with the past 10 months, dealing with massive societal disruption as it relates to the global pandemic, political unrest, racial and social reckonings, and an economic fallout. All of this while we're trying to keep up the pace and the pretense of our former lives. It's hard. It's hard on everyone, students and staff and faculty included. So I'm really excited to be here today with these two individuals because this is one way in which, as a university community, we can help one another, is to name it and to call it and to realize that we're not alone in this. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lee and Chris. As Tab so beautifully and eloquently stated, they are at the UVA Motivate Lab. They study motivation, what drives us, what gives us purpose and meaning in our lives. And I feel like we all know what motivation is, but I feel like we don't understand actually what the scientific study of motivation is. So with that, my first question to both of you, and I'm going to let you both, do what you will in terms of who wants to speak and muting and unmuting, but what is motivation? Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara, and thanks, Tab. I'm hyped now too. I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say and what Lee's going to say. Yeah, so motivation. At the root, there is a word, a Latin word, movere. It means to move. So like one way just to start to think about motivation is what moves us. But as a scientist, we get a little more precise than that. So one of the ways we get a little more precise is think about motivation as what starts us doing something, what directs us, what sustains us, and then what stops us as well. So motivation sometimes is knowing when to say when. If we want to start, like, what are the fundamentals of motivation? That's where I'd start. Lee, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think that's great. I think one thing that I see sometimes is like a distinction between sort of like motivated behavior and then what leads into motivated behavior. And so a lot of what we study and what I study is social connection. And so I have folks saying, what does that lead to motivation? But I think of it more as motivation in and of itself. And so thinking of this distinction between, like what motivated behaviors are, like that movement, and then also what plays into that movement and sort of like what the source of that movement is. But yeah, otherwise, Chris, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
So you just mentioned, Lee, that community and kind of societal impact helps to influence motivation. Could you just dig into that a little bit about what that means and how it is influenced, how motivation is influenced by our peers and others?
Sure, yeah. I mean, a big thing to recognize and to point out is that the human need to belong and the human need for social connection is fundamental. It's a fundamental human motivation. It's a thing that all of us need. And without it, a lot of maladaptive and sort of difficult outcomes can arise, including physical, as well as mental and academic and all of these things. And so, yeah, it's a fundamental human need. And when we enter new environments or even maintain the environments that we're already in, social connection is something that drives us. And so I think it sources a lot of motivated behavior and a lot of outcomes just because of how foundational it is. And when we're not able to establish that connection or that sense of belonging or that community, it can be really difficult. And I think that's part of the reason we're all here today in this conversation, because with all of us sitting in front of our screens, it's a lot more difficult than it used to be to establish those connections.
Yeah, and to build off that, Barbara, if I may, oftentimes when we talk about motivation, especially when we're talking about motivation of other people, but we do this to ourselves too, we think about it as something that's purely internal to us. Like we're 100% responsible for our motivation, and if we're not motivated to do something, it's completely our fault. And as social psychologists that Lee and I are, we think about behavior and our thoughts and our feelings and emotions that surround that behavior as a function of both our internal sort of individual predispositions as well as the situation, the environment around us. So our context that we live in really have a huge impact on our motivation and our beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. And so you can imagine in the over the course of the last 8 or 9 months, as the pandemic has taken hold and all those social events that you talked about, Barbara, our situations for most of us have changed dramatically. So one thing just to be mindful of, if you feel like your motivation for anything, for life, for school, for anything that you were interested in before, if you feel like that motivation is different now than it was than say a year ago, you're not alone. And to remember that one of the huge things that's changed has been our world around us, and that does impact us. I'm sure we're going to unpack that a little more, but I just wanted to make sure to let the students all know that your environments have changed. And so the fact that you're feeling differently, that's natural.
Yes, very true. And in terms of unpacking that, I know an important part of your research is something that you call mindset GPS, which helps people overcome adverse or difficult situations. Could you tell us what that means and how it's used in those situations?
Yeah, sure. In our field of motivation, there's a million different theories and constructs and ideas. And when we work with folks, we try to boil it down to give people nuggets they can remember. And one of those is mindset GPS. And it's this idea that just like the GPS in your phone, mine's right here. I'm sure everyone's is close by. Mine's charging because it's an iPhone and it has no battery. Just like the GPS in your phone can help you navigate when you're lost, you open up your Maps app to help you know where to go. Your psychological or mindset GPS can help you navigate when you're psychologically uncertain. So times of stress, transitions to new jobs, new school, or the pandemic, hello. In your mindset GPS are thoughts, beliefs, feelings that you have about yourself and the world around you. And the G, the P, and the S stand for 3 different mindsets. Lee already mentioned the S. And Barbara, do you remember what the S was that Lee mentioned?
You didn't tell me I was going to have a pop quiz, but growth.
Oh, growth is the G. Absolutely. Growth
sorry.
I was referring to the S he was talking about earlier.
Oh, sorry. The S is social.
Yeah, you got it. A social or sense of belonging. And Barbara, this isn't a competition. This is an exhibition. We all want to learn. So thank you for being vulnerable with us there. So the S stands for sense of belonging, and this is our beliefs about whether or not we belong personally and whether we're connected to other people in the environment. But it's also beliefs about does this environment want me here? Is this a place that is safe for me? That's especially true for folks who come from historically marginalized groups who know that all too well, who show up in environments that are openly hostile. So S is that sense of belonging that can help you orientate when you're struggling or stressed. Go back to the G, you're right, growth mindset. Many people have heard of Carol Dweck. She's a very popular psychologist from Stanford. The idea behind a growth mindset has to do with, do you believe that your skills and abilities in an area like math or soccer, can you grow and develop them over time? Or are you kind of fixed? And it's like you're either a math person or you're not, or you're either good at sports or you're not. And so a growth mindset we find is related to all sorts of positive things like feeling intrinsically motivated, overcoming challenges and persisting over time. Whereas a fixed mindset, the belief that intelligence is fixed, leads us to kind of stop when things are hard, because if I'm not good at this, I'm never going to become good at it. So if I can't do it now, I'm not going to be better at it later. So I might as well stop and do something else. So that's the G is growth, the S is social, and the P, I believe Rachel Most is going to talk about this a little later about why I go to college. The P is purpose. Do you find purpose and meaning in what you're doing, whether it's going to college, attending a meeting, or going and volunteering in the community? Is there some sort of personal meaning and fulfillment and relevance to those things? And unfortunately, in education, K-12 and higher ed, educators, I'm one, we don't always do a great job of highlighting purpose and relevance for students, and they're left to figure it out on their own. And that's not a great place for us to leave our students. So for students out there, I guess I want to reemphasize the GP and S are mindsets that you adopt in some situations and not in others, partially due to you, but partially due to the way the world is constructed around you.
I'll kind of jump on that too. I think Chris brings up a really important point that I also wanted to emphasize, is that it's very easy, sort of what Chris was saying earlier about thinking about like the environment and the external versus like the internal and how those interact with one another. It's really easy to think about motivation in terms of the individual and like, why don't I feel connected, or why don't I feel like my abilities can develop, or why don't I feel like this is relevant to my life? And we in our work try to think about it more in terms of, there's this term like opportunity structures, and thinking about, what the environment affords to me and how that influences the way that I think about my work and my motivation and things like that. And so it's really important, not to just consider the individual and say, how can I fix myself, but also how can we construct environments that are going to support individual mindsets and folks' reactions to the environment.
Yeah, such an important point to bring up. Now, if we are looking to the individual, can you give any suggestions for adapting one's mindset? So whether it is to help find purpose, and I don't want to step on Rachel Most's talk or anything coming up, but maybe just a snippet or two that you found in your research strategies that have been effective.
Lee, do you want to take this one first, or you want me to?
Sure, yeah, I can start us off. When I think about a lot of this work, in terms of mental strategies and reframing things, it always comes with how we respond to adversity and how we think about challenges. And so I think with each of those GPS components, growth mindset, purpose, and sense of belonging, they all have to do with adversity and how adversity impacts us, how we respond to it. And so when I think about strategies of dealing with transitions or trying to support your own motivation or sort of things like that, it comes down to like, how do I think about what adversity am I experiencing right now? And what does that mean? And so one example, like a more concrete example is, if I don't do well on a big test, like maybe that's the first big test of college for you or something like that. What does that mean? What does that failure or just lower grade than you're used to mean? And it can be interpreted as a sign that you're just not smart enough, or that you're not good enough and this is not the environment for you. But to reframe that and think of adversity, think of challenges and setbacks more as a way of learning and an indication that there's opportunity for growth, I think is one way to individually reconceptualize that for yourself. And it opens up a lot of new possibilities when you think about these setbacks as opportunities to grow. And even a step further, not only as opportunities to grow, but realizing that you can't really learn anything new without failure, without that first step and saying, I don't understand this and I didn't get it. So taking those cues that could otherwise be interpreted as failure and instead seeing them as opportunities to grow. And so, yeah, one thing is just reframing adversity, whatever it is, social or academic or personal, what have you.
Such a good point, Lee. And I just want to point out, like, it's just a pleasure for me to listen to Lee talk, because it was, I think, 5 years ago, maybe 6, that I met Lee. He was a second year in the Youth and Social Innovation program in the School of Education. At that time, the Curry School of Education, now the School of Education. And just the way your knowledge has progressed. It's really cool, and that you've, a testament to that growth mindset piece. So just for all of you undergrads out there, others, like there was a note by James in the Q&A about his improvement, small increments. Is that important for maintaining motivation? And absolutely. And if you want a small increment story, talk to Lee sometime about trying to do research in the local schools and just how long it took him to build relationships with people so that we could do some really cool work. So I just wanted to thank Lee for being brave and being here today. I think a couple other tips that I would suggest around the P and the S. For the S particularly, have a growth mindset about your social interactions in this space we're in now. Very few of us grew up learning how to make connections with people in a virtual world. Like some folks maybe, but most of us, face-to-face interactions are the way we've learned. So like, it's sort of like you're learning to walk all over again. And that took most of us a long time. And there's a lot of skinned knees and bruises. So just remember that if you're feeling disconnected, it's going to take some time to figure that out. And most likely your interactions are going to feel awkward. And that doesn't mean they're not, that you're doing it wrong. You probably are doing it right. It's just, you're not comfortable with it yet. So have a growth mindset about that sense of connection, and just remind yourself that connecting is important. Even if you are an introvert, having some folks that you can connect with is important. So don't forget that. For the purpose and relevance piece, one thing I often recommend for students is in your classes, take an opportunity just to reflect now and then about what you're learning and how does it match to what you've learned in the past or what you might be interested in, and sort of let that be your guide, your exploration. And like, hey, do I want to take more classes in this? Is this something I might want to major in? Can I use this in my volunteer efforts? Could I use this or something else that I'm interested in? Just reminding yourself to like take stock every now and then is super helpful. And we encourage journaling. Also, the last point I'll make, Barbara, we know from the psychological research on mental health and well-being that journaling can be really powerful, particularly if you're able to take different perspectives in your writing. So writing about your experience in the first person present tense versus past tense versus future tense, or thinking about yourself from a distance. That writing about your emotional experiences, good or bad, is a really helpful way to deal with what can be an uncontrollable world around us.
Thank you so much for that. And I think you guys bring up some really good, really practical points that people can at least start chewing over and mulling over, especially if it's very different than their typical mindset. Now, I understand that you all have continued your research throughout this pandemic, and without giving too much away, especially that has not yet been published, could you give us a little insight about things that you're finding has changed when it comes to motivation, just as it relates to the pandemic?
I can start. I'm not sure that anything that I'm going to say here is going to be a surprise to any students who have gone through this for a semester, if not longer. And I'm saying this as someone who was a graduate student, is a graduate student going through this as well. And so I definitely know the feeling, although it is a slightly different context. But I mean, one thing that I've been seeing a lot that I think has been different than pre-pandemic, I guess, is the not only mental but also physical toll that online learning and distance learning and all of this screen time can have on us. And so to me, it seems somewhat intuitive. Mentally you get tired because you're on the computer all day and you're looking at screens and everything, and that has implications for your motivation. But also this like mind-body connection piece where you're just physically more tired than you used to be, even though it feels like you're doing less. I mean, I know for me, like just not walking to grounds or walking to classes or things like that, I feel more tired. I don't know, there's less energy. And that's some of the things that we're seeing empirically as well in our work, is just that students are are exhausted, and it's not just mental, it's also physical. So that's one of the things that I've seen. But Chris, what about you? I could talk about some other things as well.
Yeah, I'll maybe say one thing that we're learning about faculty and how that might give students some insight into their worlds and how like common motivation challenges are right now. And then Lee, you might share, some of the things you're finding from some of the focus groups you've been running. But we've interviewed a whole bunch of faculty, mostly in Georgia and Tennessee, who we work with, about their experience shifting to virtual instruction due to the pandemic. And what we found was that initially there was a lot of anxiety and stress about would they be good at teaching in the online space, and actually just like how for many faculty, they've never used Zoom before. And students, I know which faculty those are because they didn't do it very well last spring, and some of them probably are still struggling now to do it. But as that sort of initial stress as they got through that initial stress, then what faculty started to realize over the summer was, oh, this isn't going away fast. We're in this for the long haul. I really do have to figure out how to teach students without seeing them. And one of the biggest challenges faculty have said is, how do I engage students online? A lot of them aren't able to turn on their cameras or aren't comfortable turning on their cameras, so I can't see their faces. Like, I can't see your faces today. I'm imagining that you're all like cheering every time I say something. But it is a challenge in those times for faculty to stay engaged, just like it's a challenge for you to be engaged. So I guess I share these initial challenges with faculty who are now experiencing this more chronic stress of adjusting to this new way of doing education. They're struggling too. And so as another way to give yourself a break, like, hey, it's common, motivation's a human challenge, but also know people around you are facing challenges too that they're dealing with. And Lee, did you want to share any insights from some of the focus groups you've been running, or maybe that's the piece you did share, but I can think of a couple nuggets that I've heard you share.
Yeah, I mean, so the exhaustion thing was one of them. I'll say another thing, and if it's not what you're thinking, Chris, please supplement. But another thing is the difficulty of, so sort of the importance of spontaneous social interactions. So in the past, when you used to be like in a class, and if you're a first year, maybe like when you were in high school or something, but you have just a spontaneous moment of social connection with somebody where you sit next to them and you ask them for help on an assignment, or just like, what did the teacher just say? Like, what are we supposed to be doing right now? Things like that seem really small have been almost completely eradicated. And I think folks are starting to see the impact of that, and just the fact it's really difficult when you don't have those spontaneous interactions to establish new connections. And so what we're seeing is a lot of students are leaning on existing relationships, whether those are with friends from back home in high school or people they've met like last year at UVA if you're a second year or something. And so yeah, it's a piece that I don't think, at least I didn't fully recognize the import of until now. And so that's sort of like the downside, I guess. The upside is that everybody is having this difficulty with spontaneous interaction. And sort of just what Chris was saying about the commonality of these challenges is that everybody is sort of seeking out ways of creating these spontaneous, if even small, social connections. And so I think it might even be more acceptable now to sort of reach out to somebody, I don't know, by email or on Collab or something like that, and just sort of being like, hey, like, do you want to get together virtually and work on this homework assignment or something like that, and feeling less worried that that's going to be seen as weird or off kilter or something. I think everybody's sort of looking for that. And because of that, there are more opportunities, although they are different than the ways that we would have gone about establishing those connections previously.
Thank you so much. I want to pivot and talk about one other aspect of your research. And then I just want everyone on the session to know that we are going to open this up for some Q&A after. I know that a couple have come through. So if you like, we will go ahead and open up that Q&A kind of on a grander scale and get to as many questions as we can. That said, one of the important parts of your research is also called utility value. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of utility value is that learning, it can be especially motivating and powerful for us when it has some utility or usefulness to us. It's relevant to maybe our future goals around, becoming a doctor, lawyer, accountant, whatever our career aspirations are, or it could have some more immediate relevance, like you're in psychology class and you're learning about depression, and this helps you understand, your best friend a little better who struggled with depression since he was in middle school. So this kind of relevance we find is really a powerful motivator for engagement in learning, and then persistence and actually grades and, continuing on to have success. So not only is it motivating, it leads to academic success. And we've been working a lot with faculty across the nation to try to embed activities in their classes that help students make these kind of personal and specific connections between, learning about math and video games, or learning about biology and gardening, and to really highlight those meanings for students based on what's interesting and relevant to students. So often in education, we're told, learn math because it's important for your future. Well, how and why, and how do you even know what I'm interested in doing in the future? And how could you possibly know if math is related to that? So like one of the things we've got to do better in education is create that environment so that students can make those connections, but it's not always there. So you might wonder, what can students do? Well, one of the things I mentioned earlier was stopping and reflecting about how things are related. Another really important way is asking questions. Ask professors or other experts in the area, hey, how is this relevant to anything in life? Tell me, we're learning I'm solving quadratic equations. How could this be relevant to my future career as a lawyer? I don't get it. And so talk to those experts about that, because they will have things to say usually, but they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about, how do I get you to learn this? So those, I'll just stop there, Barbara. That's part of that work that we found so fundamental to helping students succeed.
Thank you so much for that. And I don't want to, go into another talk by another one of our colleagues later on, Blake, about why grades matter. But one thing that you found was it actually did help increase, there were some positive outcomes when it came to final grades for those that actually went through that work and found that utility. One thing I found very interesting also was that the most kind of positive correlation were those people who would identify as being in a minoritized population. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things we're finding in our work is that, if you look like me or Lee, quite honestly, white male, middle class folks who's, both my parents had advanced degrees, our education system was designed for you in mind, explicitly, but also unintentionally, by including the values and the lifestyles of the people who designed it, who were white males. So what that is unintentionally done, although some might argue intentionally, the unintended negative consequence of that for today's students is, if you're African-American, Latinx, or maybe come from a lower income background, you might have a hard time relating to some of the examples and the way in which material is taught and presented. There's, example, less than 1% of all people who have PhDs in math are Black. So, if you're a Black student and you want to be a mathematician, it's hard to see relevant examples of folks who are pursuing that in your life. And so we've found that this kind of intervention, one of the reasons it works, it's because the learning context is devoid of those kind of values that resonate across the board. So white male culture tends to be more individualistic and achievement oriented, whereas other cultures tend to be more interdependent, focused on communal goals and helping others. And if you look in the sciences, for example, we hold up like individual achievement, who won the Nobel Prize and who's this really smart person, versus, hey, what did we do? What problems did we solve? And how did people work together? And those subtle differences in orientation can send messages to people that, hey, you don't belong, you're an imposter here, etc.
So going through that work and then again, finding that sense of belonging, it seems, is all correlated.
Yeah, like purpose and meaning and identity and belonging kind of all get connected together. And I'd be happy to speak at length about the differences among those, but I will spare everyone that for now.
What I'd like to do is turn to the Q&A. We do have a couple in there that we hope to answer live, and please feel free to put more questions in the Q&A if you have any. The first one is, I'll read it, but then I'm going to actually slightly just twist it a little, just in terms of opening it up to a broader perspective. So the question asks, what would you recommend to international student athletes who struggle with the loneliness of living in an athletic bubble and also the imposter syndrome of feeling that they are not good enough? And how I'm going to twist that a little is that I have every reason to believe that it's not just international student athletes who feel that way. So just more on a broad scale, if there's anything you could speak about loneliness living in whatever sort of physical or social bubbles that we're in, and then imposter syndrome, which is very, very common, you know, community-wide for people, especially as they're entering into a new community.
Lee, you want to take this one, or you want me to?
Sure, yeah, I'll start, and then you can jump in as need be. But yeah, I mean, as I think Barbara has said, is that, yeah, this one thing is with a lot of these challenges, it's very easy to think to oneself, you know, like, this is happening to me, and it's because of this group that I'm in, it's because of this social identity that I have, it's because of my situation internally, I guess. And so, yeah, I think the first step is just recognizing, like, this is happening to a lot of people, and everyone is feeling sort of like they're in that bubble. And so that's not to downplay the specific challenges that folks are facing, especially, you know, being a student athlete, being international. But the first step is recognizing, you know, everybody's sort of in this boat. And then the second step is, okay, so what do we do about it? And I think the first step of that step is resetting expectations and realizing, especially in the midst of a pandemic or transitions in general, is just like recognizing this is hard and we can't just expect this to come naturally. Like, this is sort of like, we should expect it to be pretty difficult at the beginning, but then also to recognize, you know, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way that this is going to improve, and there's a trajectory that this is going to follow. So yeah, so those are some of like the reframing sort of like perspective things that I would recommend. Chris, I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's great, Lee. Love what you said. And I'll just add on, one of the things we found through our interviewing lots and lots of college students around the US is that even though there's great commonality to a lot of these challenges, some of the strategies are unique to your positionality. So, you know, if you're an international student and you're a student athlete in this case, there may be ways that people react to you reaching out that are different than if you're from a different social identity group. So I think being mindful and aware of that is important. And so, like, it's not just like one strategy, hey, just reach out in this way. So think about what I would suggest is, what are the ways in which you can gather social support and make connections, and what's available to you? And you know, thinking about, like, there's a question that came in by an anonymous attendee about, like, is texting, emailing enough, or do I need to see people face to face? And I would say it probably varies a little by the person, but we all need that human connection at some point. And if texting is doing it for you, great, but at some point it probably isn't going to. And thinking about how to do that in ways that are meaningful to you. The academic imposter part is another important thing to really think through. And it's like, why do you feel as though you're an imposter? And what are some things that you can do to help build your confidence that you can be successful here? Is it talking to other people who are in your same space? Or is it I'm talking to them too much and we're all like really negative? Is there a way to break out of this that I can find some strategies for me in this situation? So having your stepping back just a second and saying, hey, why is it I'm struggling here? And what are the ways that I can get out of it? There's lots of supports on UVA's campus for students. And I know that sounds like everybody says that, but it's true. Like, use those supports. And if you're struggling academically, there's no reason not to go to the academic support folks to say, hey, this is where I'm struggling. Even if you feel like part of it's identity, part of it could be you just don't have great study strategies yet for this material you're trying to learn.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm being mindful of the time because I know we do want to stay on schedule. So I'm going to provide some questions and hope that we can do some rapid answering. Wondering how writing from a different perspective helps you grow as a person. I try to think from different perspectives, but writing is a little different than just being in your head.
I can take a first stab at this one. My understanding of that work and writing and thinking about an experience or just the events going on in one's life from different perspectives is it helps to construct a coherent narrative. And so a lot of difficulty that we face as humans is uncertainty. And so uncertainty, like we've talked about the transition, the pandemic, uncertainty is very psychologically painful for humans. And writing about one's life and one's experiences allows you to make sense of that experience in a way that follows a narrative arc, and it brings coherence and it brings a little bit more certainty to an event, and it rids those experiences of just insane amounts of like uncertainty and distress and like not knowing why. Incoherence maybe is a good way to put it. So adding that narrative structure in, and I think the writing piece of it just helps to solidify that and really helps to get it down and concretize it. So that's sort of my understanding of how that works.
Thanks, Lee. And just because of time, I'm going to put two of these questions together, but regaining motivation after experiencing a traumatic event that put you in freeze mode, or if you have, I think one came in, perhaps that was answered and I didn't see it, but whose friends are unmotivated.
Yeah, Barbara, as Lee was answering the other one very capably, I was responding to the one about friends. And I would just say motivation is partially a social construct. So being around people who are interested in the same things you do really creates some energy and momentum and inspiration. So this doesn't mean necessarily dropping your unmotivated friends. I might ask, why are they unmotivated? What are they doing that makes you feel like they're unmotivated? And so there's a whole series of questions there, whether those folks are matching your values and belief systems, but you don't have to leave them per se. You could just spend some time with groups who are interested in your things. Join a club, get a study group going, find some ways to connect with people who like what you like, and let it take you from there. So that's that piece. And the freeze mode one, oh man, experiencing traumatic events is so powerful, and it's really important to deal with that trauma. And you don't need to deal with it 24/7, but acknowledging that trauma is going to be with you for a while and maybe forever, and figuring out how you're dealing with it and incorporating it in your life is really important. And it can disrupt how motivated you are for everything else in life, and being mindful of that. And we actually call that psychological cost, that there's other things that are sort of impeding your motivation. You might be super motivated for school, but this traumatic event that's happening keeps disrupting your emotional space and how you're feeling. And it's just important to know that needs to get tended to, whether it's through counseling or other strategies you might use. So my strategy there is make sure you're addressing the trauma, and then as you're incorporating that into your identity, figuring out how that's impacting your other motivation, and go from there.
Thank you so much, Chris and Lee. I wish we could get to the rest of the questions, but I believe we now have to turn it back over to Tab to introduce our next speakers. Before I do so, though, I just want to thank you once again for all of the amazing work you do, and we are really excited to have you all continue and glean whatever information we can from all the great work coming out of the UVA Motivate Lab. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the chance.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So thank you all. Thank you both for coming. I hope y'all were taking notes. I mean, I feel like the couple of things that I walked away with is the way people are feeling given the pandemic is normal and natural. I know you've been hearing that over and over again. The mindset, GPS, growth, purpose, and sense of belonging, like reach out to them, to Lee and Chris and Barb, and go to the Motivate Lab once we're able to get back on grounds and begin exploring grounds in that way again. What I have realized though is that when we first started, there were probably 70 people on the call. There are now 124. So let me just quickly introduce myself one more time. I'm Tabitha Enoch. I'm like your Zoom hostess, your Zoom DJ for the afternoon, trying to move us from session to session. I work in the Dean of Students office, working with our first generation college students, our low income students, orientation and new student programs, our student veterans, and I'm delighted to be here today to keep us moving. So just wanted to introduce myself in that way. We are now going to go into sort of our micro labs, right? Like these sort of micro talks, TED Talk style, quick, because we know how Zoom is. People are over the Zoom and we're trying to move things quickly. So the next session in our overarching theme of the struggle is real, right? Sorting out your academic life is called Connecting with Faculty Members. How, why, and what on earth does this mean? So looking to take your conversations, if you're looking to take your conversations with faculty from beyond talking about homework and grades, this is the session for you. Faculty members Brian Helmut from our engineering department and Dave Kittleson from the College of Arts and Sciences are going to talk with you. Actually, they're going to talk along with our college life skills coach, Christy Rotman, about how, why, and what on earth it means, we say it all the time, to better engage with faculty. This is the boost of confidence you need to begin the spring semester. And let me say, once you start engaging and sort of getting the energy and the confidence up to talk to faculty, maybe you might bolster that confidence to talk to that person in the Zoom room that you might think is cute, right? And that other square over there that you're like, oh, I want to find out about that person. This is the session for you. This is more focused on faculty though, but I just wanted to throw it out there just as an aside. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Christy, to Dave, and to Brian. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tab. Thanks for setting us up. I love it. All right, so we've got Brian and Dave, thank you so much for being here with me today. To all our students out there, we're thrilled to see you. Since we have such a short time together, we're going to dive right in. So pull up that chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom, pull that up, and we want you to share with us what are the benefits of engaging with faculty outside of the classroom. What are the benefits of engaging with faculty outside of the classroom? And just flood our chat here. Yeah, here they come. They're coming in. And if you're uncomfortable flooding the chat, feel free to, you can send the message directly to one of us as well. That's totally fine. We will see it either way.
This is the fun part. This is the chance to wake up. 100 answers in the chat. Who can keep up? Incidentally, I love doing this in my classes because it's so easy to get lots of ideas really quickly.
This is great.
Someone asks, are we answering or asking a question? Either, but we're hoping that you'll answer, what do you think are benefits of getting to know and engaging with faculty?
Awesome. And Brian and Dave would love to hear from you all what your benefits are from your perspective too, as the chat continues to flow in.
Hey everybody, Dave here. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of things that, really are ringing true here. The mentor, the career outlook, the unofficial advisor, recommendation letters, getting to know someone in a humanizing way. All of those are very much things that are the way I experience those sorts of interactions. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was glad to see a couple of people are making comments about community and getting to know their professors as humans, because, in fact, we are. And we were just talking in the last session about social interactions and finding motivation in your community. And so in the classroom, that's part of the community, is the instructors and the students. And that motivates us to make the learning experience better for you also.
I think just for me, it makes it essential for what I do, right? I mean, who among us want to work outside with other people and outside of interacting with other people? So it makes it a rewarding experience for sure.
I love that. I love too that both of you, when we were planning this session, you really wanted to make sure we heard from the students. So that interaction was even part of our plan today. Okay, so I know we're short on time, so many benefits. You can keep putting them in the chat, but we're going to transition now to what are the barriers to students connecting with professors? What are the things that get in the way of building those relationships between faculty and students? And you can go ahead and send those in the chat as well.
So I'd like to just, one of them I've seen several times here, I'd like to just address is the intimidation, or in some cases even feeling embarrassed or ashamed about how you've done in a course or something. And I can tell you that I've discovered that I didn't think of that's why students wouldn't want to come and see me. And I remember when I first heard that from students and recognized it, that I was like, wow, I was afraid that, if the students weren't coming to me, maybe it's because they didn't care about things not going well. I was like, wow, I just totally misunderstood that. And knowing that and being kind of sensitive to that, I think is really something important that we can do. And, as soon as that conversation starts and we start talking, I think that feeling goes away very, very quickly for the students. So I understand that it's a barrier, but I think that, I encourage all of you to take that chance. And I think that you're going to find that we are very understanding people. We've had our own challenges, our own failures, and I don't mind sharing my personal ones with my students. And once we get past that hurdle, I think we can get really productive conversations.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. And again, comes back to something that Chris mentioned earlier is, it's the Zoom online and teaching online is also a challenge for many of your professors. And so we're both working hard to try to make it the best experience and to interact as best we can. And sometimes it's challenging from both sides. So look for those things that help you with the human connections.
Nice. All right. So we're going to transition now to one idea to overcome one of those barriers, either one that you mentioned or one that you've seen in the chat. But what's one idea that you can propose or come up with that might help kind of get past that barrier? And feel free to flood our chat with that as well. I know this one takes a little extra thought to think about. It's easy to come up with the barriers, huh? Yeah, here we go. Now we're warming up here. Yeah.
Yeah, here's some good ones coming through. Keep adding. I like the ideas about bringing a friend. If it's easier with a friend to talk with a couple of you there where you have some backup, that's a good one. I like the idea about emailing a thank you or emailing a hello to a professor. Professors are always feeling good about responding to someone that says thank you for working hard, just like you would be.
I like this one also of going to office hours, even if you don't have a specific question. And, just as a way of kind of breaking the ice and talking about things. Often some of the most rewarding conversations for me have been when we've gone beyond my course, right? We're not talking about this particular subject or this particular class or particular exam or something like that, or the student's performance in the class, but kind of coming back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of some of the reasons for these sorts of conversations of a mentor or guidance. And in those sorts of conversations that aren't about a specific course question, we've addressed things like grad school. I had a conversation just yesterday with a former student that I thought was, felt like a really rewarding conversation in terms of helping to navigate a career path. So he was in one of my classes last spring. He's graduated. He was thinking about, he wanted to continue his education. So he was thinking about doing a master's. And what he didn't know until the conversation was that in biology, most of us who've gone on to get a PhD do not get a master's along the way. And similarly, to enroll in a master's program, you have to pay tuition, which isn't a surprise. But what the surprise was for him was that he could do a PhD program without doing the master's. And the PhD program, you don't pay the tuition, they pay you. And in fact, these days, it's about $30,000 a year that you'd get paid to get your PhD in biology. So again, I think a monetary value conversation in that sense.
Nice.
I have two that I'd like to throw out that I haven't seen show up in the chat yet. And this is related to one of the questions in the Q&A also about how do you develop mentor-mentee relationships with a professor. Look for those things that help you connect. Listen for things in class that maybe aren't just about the class, that interest you, that you might like to know more about, or that just resonate with you. So for example, I'm a huge Green Bay Packers fan. When I'm teaching class this week, there's a pretty good chance that I'm talking about how sad I am this week because the Packers lost on Sunday afternoon. So if you're a football fan, maybe you want to jump in and talk about your team. Or maybe you're a Tom Brady fan and you want to rib me a little bit and, just be prepared to get it back, I suppose. So that's one thing you can do to start building that connection and relationships that can lead to mentorship. Listen for things that you connect with. The second thing that I'd like to bring up is there are programs that are sponsored by the university or student groups that allow you to get together with professors and it won't cost you anything. So in engineering student council, for example, sponsors a program where students can get together and take a professor for coffee and they'll foot the bill. You just have to apply for the money. So look for resources like that where you can get together with 1 or 2 or 3, or actually last fall I had a group of 10 friends that took me to coffee. Maybe Dave can remind us, I think there's a mechanism in the college for that also.
Yeah, absolutely. So the college, I guess, maybe we're going to be thinking of the engineering schools being a little on the cheap side, just coffee. Whereas in the college, it's a take your professor to lunch program. And so that's something that I've done many times and enjoyed every single time with students, and an opportunity for students to maybe get someplace that they haven't been, like the garden room on grounds, which is pretty decent. Again, I'm not sure how that's going to work this spring, but I know that probably most of the people here are going to be here beyond this spring, and I'm very optimistic that things are going to be getting better soon.
Awesome. Well, we are out of time, but I want to first thank both of you for being with us today. And I want to say to the students, if you have questions that we didn't get to, please put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. We will make a list and follow up with those later. I'm also going to stick some resources in the chat for you right now, so you can check those out if you want to know more about this. Thank you.
Thank you all for that informative session. I see the resources are going into the chat, and I am a Tom Brady fan, only when he was with the Patriots though, so I was rooting for the Green Bay Packers, Brian, so I was on your side this past weekend. Okay, so now moving to our next mini session. The question is, do my grades matter? Do my grades matter? Right? This is the question. People all want to know this. Blake Calhoun, I know I said this before, but this woman right here really is one of my favorites here at the university. And she's going to bring some good energy and excitement to this question. She's the assistant director of undergraduate success in engineering. She was a sociology major at UVA before going to get her master's degree, and then returned to UVA about 3 years ago. She's going to talk to us about, do my grades matter? My son was taking Algebra 2, is taking Algebra 2, and asked me, is this going to matter? And I had to be honest and say, no, but the grade probably does. Now, here's what Blake is going to do. She's going to shed some light on why many students stress about the grades, the result of stressing about the grades, and then she's going to draw a connection between how stressing over the letter grades can actually make it harder to achieve them, right? So how stressing over the letter grades can actually make it harder to achieve them. She's going to wrap up by giving us all some helpful strategies to alleviate grade-related stress. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic on to my girl, Blake Calhoun. You got it, girl.
Thank you, Tab. Thank you. You couldn't have teed me up any better. I appreciate you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I'll see you all. All right. This is always the hardest part of the presentation. It's just getting at the start from the beginning. Close your eyes. Okay, there we go. All right. So do my grades matter? And I thought about this when I was doing this presentation. And I said, I'm asking the wrong question here. The question I really want to ask us today, why do your grades matter so much to you? And I put this emoji, and it's one of my favorite ones, kind of, you didn't know I was going to flip it on you today. But that's the question. Why do your grades matter so much? And why are you asking yourself that question? And so like many of you do, and I know that you all do this, I went to Reddit to try to get the answer to this question, knowing I probably wouldn't find it there. But I was definitely hoping that I would get a start, right? Just to kind of get into the minds of how you all might be thinking. I got a lot of good insight from Reddit. Someone said, only for grad school. Okay, all right, no problem. Someone else said, obviously, better grades, more opportunities. 1 + 1 = 2, ergo, we have this. Others said, cutoffs. Haven't you heard of that one internship where if you don't have a 3.0, they don't even want to look at you. They don't care what your name is. We've all heard of that, right? More advice. Just for your first job. I heard that some when I was in college, right? I just need it for your first job, but I'm older and no one ever asked me what I got. My favorite advice that I found that made me laugh a lot was this. Just get good grades. Right, like most folks on Reddit, they really didn't know the answer, but they answered the question anyways. But the consensus was, I don't really know, just get good grades. And so I wanted to focus us on 3 questions today, since Reddit proves to be inconclusive. The first being, why do you stress over grades? Where does this come from? The second, what does grade stress do to you? And the third, how can you overcome grade stress? Now first, why do you stress over grades? And this is something from self-worth theory of motivation, which our earlier panelists touched on, thankfully, before we all got a little bit of a base. But one of the greatest human needs, according to this theory, is to feel capable. And for many students, that means I want to feel smart. Grades have always been your vehicle to feel smarter. I know this. Longer than you've been, the majority of the time you've been alive, no one's ever said, you know what, Blake? Good job. Give me a high five. Not at all. You know what they said? Good job, Blake? B+. And so we've grown to associate feeling capable with feeling smart, and feeling smart was having good grades. And so again, flipping this on you, I want to posit to you all that it's not the grade per se that you care so much about, A, B, C, D, E. It's what you believe that grade says about you. This is often represented in the equation, P equals A equals W. That stands for a performance equals an ability, which equals your worth. And we'll plug this in a second, but the way this kind of works out is that you might take something that you've done, like a test, for example. Let's take that first chemistry test you had. If you did well or if you didn't do well, you let that speak for your ability in the subject of chemistry, right? So I did great in chemistry. I'm good at chemistry. And then you let your ability really inform the way that you feel about yourself. So we'll plug this in. I won't get too ahead of myself. All right. So first off, we'll take it back before today. You got into UVA, right? I went to UVA personally, so I can joke like this. But you got into UVA, ability on 1,000. 1,000. You were like, nobody can tell you nothing. Every day you got the t-shirt, you had the sweatshirt, you might have changed your shoelaces colors. When people said, how's your day? You said, I'm going to UVA next year. No one asked, right? But that's kind of what you were doing. So you get into UVA, you feel good about yourself, right? And here you go. This is the emoji I'm going to use to represent you. I love using this thing kind of ironically. And honestly, when I use it, I hardly ever feel like I'm on 1,000, right? But today I do. So you got into UVA. I'm pretty good at school. I'm very smart. And because I'm smart, I feel great about myself. Next is an experience that some of you may have had shortly after that, unfortunately. You go into your first math test and boom, does not go the way that it used to go back in when you didn't have to study in high school, maybe. You got that test, all of a sudden your ability, it's trash. I talk to students so often and I always remark, you know, it's funny how you went from feeling like the smartest person in your class to 3 months later, you feel like, man, I don't even belong here, right? How could we go so quickly in such a short amount of time from one to the other? And so you have the low test grade, you don't feel great about your ability, and therefore you don't feel very good about yourself. And so now that we've kind of talked about why you stress over the grades, and again, that's because of the relationship that we have between a performance, what that performance says about who we are as far as able and capable people, and how being capable or being perceived as not being capable makes us feel about ourselves. So next we might ask, well, what does all that do to you? And some of our presenters have already gotten into that, but this is how I graphically like to think of this P and A and W equation. You put kind of a glass box, right? I say glass intentionally because everyone can see through it. I mean, it's not very strong. You put that up between the performance, so maybe the test, and you put that up between your ability and your sense of worth. And that makes you feel protected in a sense. And so you start doing things, what our presenters said was like maladaptive things. Because maybe you didn't do great at that math test and you don't want to feel that way anymore. And so, yeah, you could get better habits. You could do other things, but our brains are so cunning. You know what they say? Nah, I'm not even gonna let that get to me anymore. So maybe I start saying things like, this test doesn't even matter to me. Or you know what? I don't think I even really need to study this thing. I kind of got a hold of it already. So we cocoon ourselves in this way. One of the biggest ways we do that is procrastination. And I will admit, I procrastinated greatly on this presentation. I finished it about 15 minutes ahead of time. For the same reasons we're going through. I thought so much about, man, some of my colleagues might be watching, some of my colleagues will be presenting. How will they feel about me if I don't give a very good presentation? So when I'm talking, don't think that I'm saying that, this is just a college problem, it'll go away. But this is something that into your lives will continue to have to work through and work on. But procrastination is often when you're having two competing things. We used to think that folks procrastinated because they didn't care about things, they weren't smart, they didn't belong there. None of those are true. In fact, when you procrastinate, some will describe this as being over-motivated. And these two sources of motivation I have here on the screen. One, you don't want to fail. You're avoiding failure. Very understandable. You think, you know what? If I try this, I know for a fact I'm not coming with my A game to this test today. I don't even want to go about it. Last time I did it, I felt terrible. No, thank you. Or you really, really want to succeed. When you start assigning all types of importance on that letter and the grade you get on that test. Man, if I don't get an A in chemistry, how can I go to med school? What kind of people in med school don't get A's, right? All these associations that are based in not usually too much. We start assigning so much of that. So procrastination is the gridlock between when you don't want to fail, but you so want to succeed. And until one of those overcome the other, you end up really stuck. And so that's kind of what it does to us, right? When you put a lot of importance on a grade, it can lead to a lot of cocooning of your sense of self-worth. You think, man, I directly relate that grade to how I'm going to feel about myself. And so you start to have some maladaptive strategies. And one of those is procrastination. And so I want to end here in thinking about, well, it's not all doom and gloom. How can you overcome some of this grade stress? But first off, this equation's a lie. And I don't want to confuse you. It's very real. Tab mentioned I was a sociology major. And one of the things that we will say is that things that are real in their consequences. Right? So it doesn't matter if ghosts are real. What matters is that we will watch a TV show that asks the question, are ghosts real? Like Ghost Hunters, if you've seen that before. And so this is a very, very real thing that we act out amongst ourselves and amongst each other. These might be things that you don't just think, but you reaffirm with peers and with other social groups that you're a part of. And so the thing to know about this is that, we'll break it down, your performance is in no way completely indicative of your ability. Very much so to do with grades, to bring this back full circle. And so just because you don't get a good grade doesn't mean you're not capable of learning or doing well. I can think of many instances of what I've talked to students, and instances in my own life where, you know what, maybe I didn't deserve that grade that I got. I got an A, but I guessed on 3 of those questions, and that was the difference between maybe a C and an A. Just because I ended up getting the A doesn't mean that I'm very qualified and competent in that subject. In the reverse, as we have all talked about so far, and as we've seen this semester, just because you don't do well doesn't mean you're not capable. There are many other factors going on this semester, societal and personal things. We are all learning in new environments. Today, I'm talking to you from the kitchen table where I had to clear everything off of it because I never imagined I would be using this at a desk, right? Environmental factors. So all types of things get in the way of this kind of one-for-one relationship between a grade and your sense of ability. So that's the first half on our left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I want to make a strong statement that your ability should in no way 100% contribute to your sense of self. And I know that it's easier for me to say than it is for you to feel. And I'll remind you of what I said earlier, that this is the beginning of a long-term process, right? So college may be the first time where you failed academically. It was the first time I failed academically. And I didn't know what that meant about who I was or who I was going to be. But I'll tell you that I'm sitting in front of you, ironically talking about failing, as someone who has failed and someone who is talking to you, trying to help you get a little better at failing, but doing better after you fail, failing up per se. And so I joke with students that none of us know what grades Beyonce got. I don't know, I don't even think Beyonce went to college. She doesn't have to, right? And the reason why we don't know what grades Beyonce got is because we have assigned worth to Beyonce beyond what she can do for us academically. Somehow we think, you know, you're a good enough singer, I don't care what grades you got, no problem. We do that with other non-famous people, so your family, right? Other friends you have. I don't walk down the street and say, I don't want to talk to that person. They look like a 2.5. I don't do that, right? But somehow we think that the entire world is going to do that to us. And that the only way that we can express ourselves is through numbers and letters that don't have too much correlation to who we are as people. And so working on disrupting that is very important towards answering this question of what can I do to overcome stress about grades? And so my last slide here, and I'll spend a little time on this, we've got 5 minutes or so. Arm yourself with information, right? And so you've heard this before in this presentation, but I'll give you a couple of reiterations here. Value learning over a grade. Our last presenters who talked about graduate school, and I actually work in engineering school. Brian Helmke, a colleague in engineering school. I'm sure Brian will tell you that in grad school, in engineering, it's not just good enough to say, you know, I don't know how to build a bridge, but I did get an A in that class. Not good enough. It is so much more important to us and to your long-term success that you understand the mechanics of maybe how building a bridge works. Maybe you were sick today at the test and you didn't get an A. Okay. I'd much rather you learn something than focus on the grade. And as we talked about before, ironically, your grades tend to get a lot better when you worry less about the grade and more so about, I need to retain and be able to show what I know on these evaluations. Second, embrace tasks as challenges and not as threats. When we talk about approaching success versus avoiding failure, that's usually the big linchpin there. Seeing this test as something that might expose you, like, oh my, as if the professor assigned it because they knew that you weren't going to study that week. That's not true. The test is coming no matter what you did that week. Think of this as an opportunity to show what you know. That's what every evaluation is. No one starts a test at a negative grade. No one has to work out of a hole. Everyone's starting at 0, which is a positive number. That's I checked, right? You only have the chance to earn points. You're not really losing points in a test per se. Third, give yourself a break from weighty expectations. Just because you've done fantastic before, we're not in that same setting right now. This is the perfect time this past year. You know what? I did great when I had a routine and when I could kind of take the bus to work. But now I'm home and I want to go, hang out with my fish tanks or talk with my dog. And so there's a lot of things where I'm not as productive as I used to be. And I really had to learn to be okay with that and to lower my own expectations and manage my own expectations. And last, seek real answers from professionals, not Reddit, as I did jokingly earlier. And so we have the Career Center. If you're in engineering school, we have the Engineering Career Development Center. Every school has a version of this, right? Go talk to someone. Did that internship really require me to have a certain GPA? Maybe I don't want that one then. Is this job really not going to look at my application if I'm doing, maybe I don't want to work there, right? Get real answers. And that's my tips to you all. So thanks for your attention. We have like a minute left for questions. I will check them now. Let's see. All right, I don't see any questions. Are we all good, Tab, to go?
I think we are all good. Thank you, Blake. That was perfect. A good word to remind us that our self-worth isn't connected to our performance and our grades. But as we think about our grades, the other thing we want you to think about today is some of you may be wondering, how am I going to figure out my major to, think about grades, right? How am I going to figure out my major? So our next session is how can you explore that opportunity and your academic interests while we are all in this virtual experience? You may still need to figure it out. You may still need to declare your major, think about what you're interested in. We have Rachel Mose, who this girl and I have been around the block a number of times together. Again, one of my other faves here at UVA. She's the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs in the College of Arts and Sciences and is a wealth of knowledge of all things college. Also a professor of anthropology. She's going to talk to us about how we can explore our interests virtually and while we are doing this from home. So with that, I'll pass the mic right on over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Tab. Back at you. So I'm going to dive in right away also, since we only have 15 minutes, and I am going to start by, let's see, slideshow from beginning. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. And welcome. So I want to go back to something Chris said when they presented about the P and GPS, the purpose. And I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on this. But if it's not something you thought about before, think about why you're here. Why do we go to college? I think for a lot of students, it kind of get wrapped up in the swell of everybody applying, and it's just what you do. And maybe you don't have a good reason, but that doesn't mean that you can't find one. Because being in college and earning a college degree is valuable. I've always loved this picture. It's a couple of years old. I don't know who the student is, but just the sheer joy at graduation, I've always found wonderful. But students say that college helped them grow intellectually. Doesn't matter what you're going to do afterwards. It's about becoming an educated person, about growing and maturing. For many students, regardless of what school you're in, it's helping you prepare for a job. The college is a little bit different, the College of Arts and Sciences, in that we're not a pre-professional school, but many of our students go on to grad school and get jobs in academia. It's also a good investment personally. A lot of the data, in fact, most of the data show that over your lifetime, people with a college degree will earn more. And some important facts about people who graduate from college, if you need some motivation, is they live longer, they're healthier. A lot of jobs, just the baseline is a college degree. For some more and more, it's a master's. And for many, it doesn't matter what that's in. They just want a college educated person. But people who have gone to college are more likely to enjoy the work that they do. And they have more options and can change careers more easily because you learn how to learn. And there's no way you can predict now where you're going to be in 5 years after graduation, let alone 10, 20, 30, and 40 years. So you have to be flexible and you have to learn how to learn. So how do you do some of this? I think journaling, to Chris and Lee's point, is a great way to reflect on this a little bit, to think about why you're here and find that purpose and motivation. For those of you who are like, I have such a hard time picking courses and I don't know what I'm interested in and I like everything or I like nothing, and we'll talk about that first and then get to the major, is some things to ask yourself are, what do you like to read in your spare time? Do you gravitate toward history? Do you gravitate toward novels? Do you gravitate toward things about archaeology, my discipline? What do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What was your favorite class? What was your friend's favorite class? I always tell students to talk to their peers, but ask them why that was their favorite class. Because a really great professor can make a course whose content you might not be that interested in more interesting. And the content is going to be interesting to you no matter what it is, if it's a topic that you're interested in. One that I thought is a great piece of advice that someone gave to me a while back is browse the books for a department in person if you're on grounds and go to the bookstore, or online, right? So go to the textbooks that philosophy has for their classes. Go to the books that English has. Go to the books for a specific course. And if you can look at them online or in person, think about whether they're interesting to you to read. I would also say pick a couple of different majors or programs and read their websites and look at their course descriptions. It's really hard to tell from SIS what the course description is, but a lot of departments have more information on their website. Lots of choices. This is mostly a slide from Arts and Sciences, but we've got 30 departments with 65 programs and thousands of courses every semester. So look for 2 things that you know you like, that you enjoyed in high school or in your first or second year here. And then look for something that you've never taken before, right? Most high schools don't offer linguistics, Middle East studies, East Asian studies, archaeology, global studies. So take something in your comfort zone that you want to explore more in depth at the college level, and then look for something that's new and completely different. And see what interests you. And again, talking to people is really important. So there's still, it's not the same as going to somebody's office and having a conversation with them, though I think you can certainly email faculty. This is another way to connect and say, I see you're teaching you know, Anthro 2500 in the spring, and that looks like an interesting course. Can you tell me more about it? Or do I need prerequisites for it? Or is it open to second years, or is it okay for a fourth year? Whatever the question is, do some research. Can I talk to you about it? Is fine also. So you can still explore. A lot of it might be online. A lot of it might be through the bookstore's website. But again, if you are on grounds and want to walk over to the bookstore, even if that's not where you buy your books, it's a good way to see what kind of books the various departments and courses offer up. So how about your major? And I will admit this is geared a little more specifically towards students in the College of Arts and Sciences, because they come into the college and spend 2 years without having to declare a major. Whereas in other schools, you know, if you're in the School of Nursing, you know what your major is. I can't say this enough, and I say this to students multiple times, but your major is not your career. And you see a list of 5 boxes there with some different myths, that there's only one perfect job, that your major is your career, that it's a lifelong decision. If you declare anthropology, that's all you can do with your life. And the question I answer most frequently is, I really love X, and you can fill in the blank: music, art, anthropology, chemistry, biology. But what am I going to do with that? I don't want to be an anthropology teacher. I don't want to be a biology teacher. And my answer is always the same, and that's anything you want. And again, this is mostly true for students in the liberal arts and sciences. But again, I can't say it enough, your major isn't your career. So what should you major in? What's the best major for a career in? And fill in the blank. Some of you may know exactly what you want to do. You'll probably change your mind and end up a different career 20 years out. So the answer really is this: the best major is what you want to study, what you enjoy, and what you want to learn about. And if you think back to that talk on motivation, if you heard it, and if you didn't, you can watch the recording. What you're going to do best in is what you enjoy and what motivates you and what you love. For me, that happened to be archaeology. But don't push yourself into a field that you think is going to get you a good job, especially if you don't like it, because you won't do well and you won't enjoy your time here, which is precious. And it's a once in a lifetime shot to get an undergraduate degree. So your major really should be what you love to study. But then I get, yeah, but what do careers, you know, what do employers want? Well, we hear many times, and again, this isn't true for everything. If you want to be a nurse, you're going to have a nursing degree. It doesn't mean you can't get one later, but as an archaeology major with no courses in science or nursing, I can't go on and be a nurse. So it's not that there's not a correlation for some fields, but for most employers, they don't really care what your major is. What they want are the skills you get out of a college education. If they ask what your major is, because they want to hear you talk intelligibly about why you picked history, about why you picked archaeology. They certainly don't want to hear, because I thought it would get me this job. They want to hear about your passion for the discipline. And the number one skill employers want, and we've heard this for years now, is writing. What do you get from almost every major at the university? Writing skills. And even if you're in a STEM field or you're in nursing or architecture where there are fewer writing courses, you can still get those, you can still take those courses and develop your writing skills. These are things you learn in college that employers value that you can add to your resume, right? No matter what classes you're taking. How to see the big picture, how to ask questions and do research, how to respond constructively and respectfully, how to work independently and with other people, good communication skills. You can compile a professional track record through volunteer work, through summer jobs, through jobs in the fall and spring. Information, good courses on data analysis, a basic understanding of data and minimal understanding of statistics. So you can become a really well-rounded, good potential employee no matter what your major is. I'll say again, your major ought to be what you love to study. If you think back to what I said about academic interests, the way you do that is by taking some courses in your comfort zone to see if you like them at the college level, but taking courses you know nothing about to explore areas that are new to you. This slide is just a little bit about the liberal arts and the fact that employers really do want liberal arts majors. They want people that can think critically. That's in that top left quote. Solve problems. You need to convince someone that you're job interviewing with that you know how to learn. You've learned how to learn. You know how to do research and you know how to write. And you'll get that from any major. I get questions a lot like, well, I'm going to have 2 majors and a minor because that'll get me a better job. No, 2 majors won't get you a better job. Employers care very little, if at all, about a minor. The reason to do that is, again, your personal interest. As for GPA, some have a GPA cutoff, not all do. I usually ask parents when I do a talk at orientation, and Tab's been there as a witness, is how many of them were asked for their college transcript by the time they were on their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th job. And when they were, it was just to confirm they had a college degree. They were not asked what their major was, and they weren't asked what their GPA was. The regrets I hear were, I forced myself into X when I really loved Y, and now it's too late and I can't go back and study what I was really passionate about. I think I've talked about most of this, and I just want to be aware of the time too. But I'll leave it up here for a second just so you can reflect on it a little bit. And again, say that what employers care about are your ability to write and do research and speak well and have some understanding of quantitative data. You will get this through your electives, through any major you study, because mostly what they want is a creative application of knowledge. They want people that can think. So step 1 is explore through different courses. A lot of our students do that as they're filling requirements. But force yourself into an area that's new and different too, because that's also how students find a major. Well, my friend told me to take this Middle East Studies class and it was really good and I had no idea it existed, and now that's my major. So that's another important fact too. And then finally, I want to leave you with this, which is to have a story to tell about why you picked your major, or any question that somebody may ask you in the future. This is called the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. You might get a question about, tell me why you picked a history major. You could use STAR. Tell me about a difficult situation you were in and how you dealt with it. So you don't want to just say, oh, well, once people were really mean to me and I had to navigate my way through it, so I did, right? You want to explain the situation, tell them what your responsibility in it was, what actions you took, and what the result was. What major will help you with this? Every single one of them. So you want to have this story to tell, and you can do that, again, with anything that you major in. I think when the faculty were talking, they mentioned about reaching out for help, and it's always seems a bit of a cliche to say there's lots of help here. There's lots of help here, but there is, even when we're not all on grounds together. Students, reach out to people. If you're in the college, reach out to your association dean, reach out to your faculty advisor, reach out to program directors. Every single major in the college has a director of the undergraduate program. So ask them some questions like, I think I want to major in anthropology. Tell me what's involved in that. What courses do I take? How much flexibility is there? What do your majors do? Can I do independent research? Is there a distinguished majors option? Every department has that, and every department in the other schools has the equivalent. They just call it something different. talk to your peers, talk to the faculty who teach your classes as well. Everybody that you encounter is a potential resource. And I also can't say enough that we're all here to help you figure things out and navigate your way through the university. I know I talk fast, so if any of this was of interest and you want to go back and watch the recordings more slowly, that's fine. I'm going to stop sharing. I probably have time for one or two questions. So how can you go from simply knowing that you're interested in a course of study to finding purpose within that field? You know, that's hard to, in terms of spending a career in it, that's a little hard to know as a college student. But I recommend finding a way to do independent research. All of our faculty do research, not just our STEM field. So if it's English, see if you can work with a faculty member and help them with a research project. See if they have any recommendations, the faculty teaching your courses, or again, the program directors. It is hard to know how you're going to feel 5 and 10 years out, and the data show us that people switch careers, not just jobs, 5 to 7 times. And that's why that flexibility of learning how to learn is so important. Let's see, do you have any tips on how to maintain the professional interest as a college student to explore opportunities? I have to admit, I'm not exactly sure what that one means. Professional interest in terms of jobs, I would say the Career Center would be great for that. And again, talking to the faculty, many of our faculty also have job experience, even though they're in academia now, so use those connections. And I know I'm at my time, so thanks. Wish I could see all of you as everybody said, but I hope this was helpful.
Thank you so much, Rachel Most, for sharing that wisdom. I wrote down learning how to learn. Yes, that is the key. So now if some of you all were going to drop off this call, don't do it, because next are the real superstars of the show. I see that, listen, I see your face already, Erica. I see Sela, I see y'all coming in. So next we have a student panel. We've got 3 members of the Academic Support Committee for the Peer Advisor Program over in the Office of African American Affairs. They're going to talk to you and give you the student's perspective. So again, if you were like, I'm gonna click off, stop right now, because they're gonna talk to you about how you can not only survive, which is certainly baseline, they want you to thrive this semester. So we've got Sela Carrington, who is a 4th year public policy and leadership major. We've got Erica Stevens, who is a 4th year cognitive science major, and Gabrielle Oliver, who also is a 4th year double majoring in youth and social innovation and psychology. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to y'all. Thank you for joining us today.
Sorry, guys, let me just get myself together a little bit. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction that you gave us. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you have had a wonderful day thus far and you find yourself busy yet stress-free as you prepare for the beginning of the spring semester. Thank you all for joining us today for this presentation entitled Work Smarter, Not Harder Online. Again, my name is Erica Stevens, as introduced, and I am a 4th year student in the college studying cognitive science with a minor in health and well-being.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Oliver. Again, I'm a 4th year in the School of Education and Human Development, studying youth and social innovation and psychology on the pre-med track.
And finally, my name is Sela Carrington. I'm also a 4th year, majoring in public policy and leadership in the Batten School. And next year I'll be attending law school.
Together, Gabby, Sela, and I serve on the Academic Committee of the Office of African American Affairs Peer Advising Program Executive Board. The Office of African American Affairs is located on Dawson's Road, which you may be familiar with depending on the amount of time you have had to explore grounds thus far. Dawson's Road is located near New Cabell, which is where the majority of humanities classes take place when in person.
OAAA seeks to create a supportive environment that promotes the students' full participation in UVA's extracurricular activities and to enhance the sensitivity of the larger community to the needs and interests of Black students and students at large. OAAA is a wonderful resource for all students, regardless of background. We invite you to reach out for resources, whether that be to a faculty member or an upperclassman. OAAA's doors are always open.
For today's presentation, we'll be discussing how to actually work harder, not smarter in a virtual environment. To frame this presentation, let us begin by exploring the different benefits and challenges posed when learning virtually.
Now we are going to discuss a few benefits and challenges of remote learning. For the benefits, there's increased flexibility, a sense of reduced stress, recorded lectures. All of my professors recorded their Zoom lectures, and I believe that is the norm across the board. So it was incredibly useful for me to be able to rewatch lectures in case I missed something, or if an emergency situation comes up, that option is available to you. Asynchronous classes allows you to learn at your own pace. I had a few asynchronous classes last semester, and it was nice to plan when I would watch the lectures and take quizzes around my own schedule. And then for the challenges, we have motivation and accountability. Motivation can decrease over time as Zoom fatigue grows. Time management, as the semester progresses and assignments pile up, it can be difficult to effectively manage your time. Confidence. If you're not seeing the results on your projects and exams, that certainly can be frustrating, leading to decreased confidence. Productivity. Zoom is tiring and you feel less motivated to do work. And then outside stressors and distractions. Like many of us, I became obsessed with TikTok during quarantine, and it's definitely tempting to be on that app when my phone is near me. Everyone has most likely faced these challenges at some point in their college career, and it's important to take it one step at a time and keep pushing forward. Now we dive into what it really means to work smarter, not harder.
The idea of working smarter, not harder, centers around eliminating additional steps, hurdles, or barriers to learning while using your time wisely to accomplish tasks more quickly. Example of this may be prioritizing your needs in a weekly planner, completing small tasks first, or even rearranging the way in which you complete tasks. A personal example that I love to use when it comes to rearranging tasks occurred during the spring of my first year. I was taking calculus at the time, and for some reason, I really struggled with motivation. I was oftentimes dreading to complete assignments, and when I did complete assignments, I pushed them off to the very end of the day, despite being tired. After receiving advice from a mentor, I decided to complete calculus work as soon as I finished class at the end of each day. This allowed me to complete calculus assignments early, while creating more room for tasks I enjoy, such as going to the gym, writing, or spending time with friends in Newcomb.
Our first tip is to set clear goals and intentions. It's important to know what your short-term and long-term goals are. A daily planner helps keep you organized and less stressed because once you've completed a task, you can simply check it off your list. A monthly calendar is best for deadlines that are weeks away. Carefully review your syllabus for each class and take note of dates for big projects and exams. Setting aside time to assess your goals helps to keep track of your progress, and then you can make adjustments wherever necessary based on your own schedule.
Our second tip is to identify your most important task each day. We often find ourselves in situations where we have a large number of tasks to complete with a limited timeline. By completing a goal list in order of priority, we become more structured and develop a sense of increased motivation since we have targets already in mind. While planning preferences can vary depending on person, I find it easier to plan 1 week in advance or each morning upon waking. In the beginning, it can be tough to stick to a schedule, but over time, it gets easier and becomes more natural. Planning also helps to break large tasks down into more manageable chunks. This helps to reduce stress and keep us pushing towards our overall goals. Along with planning, it can be helpful to hold maximum limits when working on a single task. This can help to reduce stress and anxiety. Here we have a picture of a habit tracker, which helps to keep a person accountable for their personal goals. You can establish targets and sort of challenge yourself to become the best person you can be while seeing progress and seeing areas that may need a little bit more work.
The next tip is to set up a comfortable work environment. This is especially important to reduce distractions. In a virtual setting, it's easy to be tempted to be on your phone, watch TV, etc. So we recommend creating a space specifically for your work. We all love a good nap, but try to work away from your bed so that you don't accidentally fall asleep. Have snacks and water nearby to refuel energy whenever needed. And then working near a window to get some natural light is nice to make you feel more awake and energized in the morning, which will help for productivity.
Something that I've found to be useful throughout my time at UVA, which may seem like something small, is putting my computer on Do Not Disturb during class and making sure that my Zoom call window takes up the full screen to ensure that I'm focusing on class instead of online shopping, which I have been very guilty of over the past couple of months.
Our fourth tip is to create boundaries that promote self-care. In today's age, we find ourselves distracted by a lot, and by a lot, I mean social media. As I was preparing for this presentation, I checked my screen time and I realized how deeply embedded social media was into my life. I typically don't consider myself a social media person, but I realized I spent over 100 hours within the past few weeks on both my phone and laptop, just searching the web and looking at TikTok videos. I definitely encourage you all to check your screen time to see how much time you spend on the internet and other forms of media. The creation of boundaries in this area allows you to be present in the moment without thinking about task lists or the lives of others who seem seemingly perfect online. Sometimes we just need to kick our feet back, put on a face mask, and listen to music. A sleep schedule can also be helpful to ensure you receive the correct amount of sleep needed to function at peak performance. Burnout is a real thing, so together let's try to schedule time for ourselves and block out time in our schedules.
Along with having a really healthy sleep schedule, I've benefited from creating times for breaks to freshen my mind. This helps promote creativity and pushes you forward towards your goals and your personal deadlines. We all know that mental blocks are going to happen, but one suggestion is to work on assignments for a predetermined amount of time. Timers can be a really great way to keep track of your progress throughout the day and can also be really useful in reducing distractions like social media when trying to complete important assignments, goals, and tasks.
The next tip is to use resources and tools that will help you be more productive. UVA has some great resources such as the Writing Center, the Math Collaborative Learning Center, and CAPS. If you're struggling with a paper or want someone to look over it with you, the Writing Center is the place to go. Have a huge calculus exam coming up? The Math Collaborative Learning Center has tutors available to help. College can be very stressful at times, and CAPS is here to help students dealing with anxiety and copious amounts of stress. The Apple and Android stores have free apps like Forest and Todoist. Forest allows you to plant a tree, and your tree will grow as you focus on your work. Unfortunately, if you leave the app halfway, the tree will whittle away. Todoist is a task management tool that will turn complex to-do lists into easy and manageable ones. It helps you keep track of your tasks in an organized and simple way. I personally have been using the Pomodoro technique for a while now. And with this method, you will set aside 20 to 30 minutes where you're super focused on the subject matter at hand, and then take a 10-minute break. You repeat this process for as long as you need. I find that this particularly helps when working on work in more challenging subjects when it's easy to get discouraged and frustrated.
Our final tip for this presentation is to breathe. We understand that college is a stressful time where you experience a number of different situations that occur simultaneously. Within the virtual environment, we also know that some of you may face even greater challenges than usual. The most important person during your college experience is you. Sometimes in the academic world, we think that carving out time for ourselves is bad. We associate it oftentimes with the lack of productivity, but instead we should promote it. Self-care allows us to take care of ourselves while reflecting on our goals, experience, and overall position in life. As the saying goes, we live and we learn. Life is a journey of trial and error. Any mistakes we make today will not discredit us from future success. Failure is our first attempt in learning. It is an experience for us to learn from. Remember, it is not about how you start, it is about how you finish. A lot of people may be asking you right now about your future, and you may not have the perfect answer. I surely didn't as a first year, and I still don't have things perfect as a fourth year. These are all normal feelings that everyone experiences along their journey. Pace yourself by taking things one day at a time and try to find something positive in every experience.
It's also important to note that everyone has a different way of going about things. What works for us may not work for you, and vice versa. But the purpose of our presentation is to give you different ways to overcome adversity by using whatever works best for you. You still have time to adjust and bounce back in whatever capacity you desire, because college is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Our definition of working smarter, not harder, may be different from yours. Because of this, self-reflection is crucial in determining what works best for you now and identifying ways to work around any perceived weaknesses. Sometimes it helps to self-reflect, which can be done by journaling, or possibly making use of the Career Center. Talking with the college life skills coach, calling up a friend, talking to your peer advisor, TA, RA, or even reaching out to a professor for support. All of these resources are ways to contribute to your growth and confidence during your time at UVA.
We have now come to the conclusion of our presentation, and we have 3 major takeaways for you. Intentionality is important, prioritize self-care, and finally, breathe. Thank you all so much for joining us. Our emails are listed on this slide in case anyone would like to reach out for support. For those of you who may be interested, the Office of African American Affairs' Peer Advisor Program application closes this Friday, January 29th.
Thank you so much, ladies. The takeaway for me from this is TikTok is of the devil and is a time sucker, right? You find yourself on there and the next thing you know, 3 hours later, you're making your own TikToks. But thank you. I took some notes on that in terms of how to work harder, smarter, and we appreciate your time. So thank you so much for that, ladies. And thank you for leaving your email addresses for everybody. So with that, we are almost at the end. One more presentation. Again, I don't want you to leave. Our last session is entitled FOMO in Times of Chaos. So what do I do now? It's chaos. What do I do now? Andres Ashu is the director of the Office of Citizen Scholar Development. And y'all are probably like, what is that? Well, it is our Office of Fellowships at the University of Virginia and the Office of Undergraduate Research. Research is really important to think about while you're here at UVA. He and his team have worked with thousands of students as they navigate the complexities of the universities, compete for fellowships, make the transition to life after college in a variety of ways. So he works with students in a variety of ways. He will guide you how to wade through the options, to take charge of your academic development, and to think about what might be the next best decision for you. So with that, and without further ado, I'm gonna, oh, I muted myself before I passed the mic. I can tell I'm getting near the end. I'm passing the mic to you, Andres, you got it.
I appreciate it, thanks, Tab. All right, let's get this up here on the screen. Good, I think everyone can see that well. So I am running up on the end of time, so I'm gonna jump right in. This is gonna be great because if you've stuck with us this long, the folks from the Motivate Lab unknowingly did a glowing advertising job for my office, which is wonderful. And you're going to hear a lot of things sort of repeated, but I'm going to try and give you some tangible things that you can do today that maybe are a little against the grain. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about risk first. Uh-oh, jumping ahead here. And you may not know what lemmings are. This is a really old computer game. It was based off of a myth that lemmings were, they are rodents, but that there was a myth that they were believed to commit mass suicide. And so your object in this game was to keep them from all jumping off this hill. But I'm going to talk about risks in terms of how people manage, or I'm going to talk about lemmings in terms of those people who risk everything. And I'm talking about things that are really serious, right? So binge drinking, not thinking that sex has emotional, physical, or potentially financial consequences, breaking laws, having a raging party during a pandemic, those sorts of things. However, I'm also going to throw in here
the types of students who maybe do a lot of things that don't seem to have a lot of risk, but they can add up. And so at UVA, that might be an inability to say no. FOMO, this fear of missing out and saying yes to every single thing, is actually a guaranteed way to miss out on what's important and potentially be risking everything. On the flip side, you've got rock dwellers. Most people at UVA aren't really rock dwellers either, but these are the folks who just fulfill requirements. You're just here, you're going to fill these steps, you get a degree from UVA guarantees you a job. You're just doing what you're told, nothing more. What I want to say here is that in either case, you're the pinball, okay? And I don't know that you want Bart to be planning your life on a whim because he decides he wants to try pinball. In both cases, whether you're risking everything or whether you're just following a checklist and thinking this will guarantee things will work out, you are ceding your agency. All right, both cases you're doing that. And what I want you to do is I want you to feel a little more empowered in the midst of all this chaos, all the things you can do at UVA, the simple tried and true paths that seem before you that if I just do these things, it'll be all right. And your life probably is a lot more like this. The University of Virginia is an amazing institution with a lot of opportunity, a lot of things you can do. And so with an added pandemic, throwing things online, a lot of things we thought maybe were a little more certain are not. We're left asking ourselves, what can I do now? And how do I go about this? So I've raced through this first part. And the irony there is that I want to teach you a little bit about risk management. I'm going to give you a productive middle way. You're probably all in the middle of rock dwellers and lemmings anyway, but I want to give you some really productive ways to address this. And the number one thing is you need to slow down. The world wants you to move a lot faster than you actually need to. And you know, some of your peers confessed and were open about the challenges that they have regarding social media use and how that can create problems. And a lot of social media is just going to continue to be there to speed things up. So the big thing is I want you to slow down. And then I'm going to give you these 3 quick steps that you'll do slowly. Reflect, own it, and act. So let's go into reflect here. I want you to take some time. And so, you know, the Motivate Lab folks said this, your peers said this, Blake Calhoun said this. I want you to take some time and I want you to reflect. And I want you to think about some of these questions. How have you come to be who you are? What are your values? What are your long-term goals? What skill, experience, or knowledge gaps do you need to achieve those long-term goals? And here's the thing, I actually want you to write it down. So yes, go get that journal. Even if it's a piece of paper, you got a bunch of loose leaf, an old notebook you no longer use because you're doing everything on the computer, go grab that. And I want you to actually start writing. Like we heard at the beginning, writing's helpful for your health, but it's also a form of thinking. And in our office, we're often challenging students to write their reflections first, because it's in writing that you actually start to wrestle with things. I know because students most often are frustrated by that and say, well, I just want to meet for 5 minutes and discuss, you know, can I find 10 minutes with you? Can I? We love the idea of if we just meet with someone and brainstorm and sit in these meetings, that'll be helpful. But the reality is you're avoiding necessary work that you have to do, okay? So I want you to trust me, and I want you to get a piece of paper, write these questions down, and I want you to spend some time reflecting on them. A couple of paragraphs worth, just write freely. And you don't have to show it to anyone. And you might not have the answers to all of these. That's okay for now, but you're gonna need to have the answers to these at some point, all right? You're gonna need to broaden your horizon beyond just college, just these next month, this next semester, these next few years, and think about longer term goals, okay? So you're gonna reflect. Next thing we're gonna do is you're gonna own it. So you need to stop looking to your peers for affirmation. I think what I wanna say there is a big tendency while at the university is to only focus on what everyone else is doing and think that if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing it right. If I'm not striving to be a lawn resident, I'm missing something. No one is ever going to care that you're a lawn resident. Ever, I promise you. Those are the types of things, a lot of these things that we care about that are fun. I'm not saying they're not fun, that are part of the culture at UVA, that create small communities. You will forget those. Those will not end up on your resumes. Those are the first things you're going to cut because no one's going to know or care about those in the future. Stop looking just around you for affirmation and start lifting your head up and look at a horizon that's farther away. I want you to find authoritative information. And by that, I mean, don't just look to the students who've just done it before you, or the student who just graduated, or you can look beyond that. And in some cases, there's real wisdom that you would otherwise be missing out on. But by authoritative, I mean, you probably shouldn't come to me and talk about the finer points of astrophysics or archaeology. Those just aren't my areas of interest or expertise at all. So why do you go and ask your friends, people who just graduated, things about life and broader circumstances of your future when that's not their area of expertise, okay? When you find people, it's your job to drive the mentoring relationship. Come up with good questions for specific mentors, all right? So you've got to admit that you don't know something, and sometimes that's how simple this part could be. What don't I know and what I really want to know? And how could I go about learning that? And who would be able to help me figure out how I could go about learning that? And when they tell me that I need to read something, after I read these things, what's my next step, okay? And here you've got to prioritize and make a plan. Look, the fear of missing out is ridiculous, and quite frankly, you know it, okay? If you really think about it, and certainly if you ask those people that I'm asking you to reach for just a little bit wiser, a little bit older, a little bit further in their life's trajectory, they'll tell you there was always something I could have done or should have done. If I knew more about mortgages before I got one, I would have been better off. But I don't get that luxury. It's fine. If I knew more about kids before I had them, maybe that would have been helpful, right? It certainly would have. Life's just not like that. It's okay. You've got to move on. So reflect, own the fact that you're going to drive here, prioritize, and make a plan. And then the next piece of this is you've got to act. Make sure you schedule the things that matter, like your peers were telling you in the presentation just before this. Commit to something. And notice I just said something. You can have more than one thing, but really just stretch on one thing. Do something that you're going to learn about deeply outside of just going to class and doing what's required of you here. Don't sweat rejection. You got to move on. You're going to hear a lot of no's. You're going to fail a lot. But like Blake Calhoun was saying earlier today, no one's really ever going to ask you about your grades later on. But when you challenged yourself, when you took that interesting course that you weren't sure about, and maybe it was a lot harder than it seemed and you got a bad grade, you're going to have some great stories. You're probably going to have learned a lot because you're interested in it. Like Dean Most was talking about. And here's the big piece. You need to repeat the process every few months. All right. The folks in the Motivate Lab were talking about writing in terms of developing a coherent narrative. And I think I understood where they were going, but I'm gonna argue with them a little bit there. I think a coherent narrative is not really a good goal necessarily. And the reason for that is the same reason why you're going to repeat this process over and over again every so often. You're a person. You're a human person. You're complex and messy with dignity and self-worth that's been there longer before you could eat solid foods. Okay? Certainly a long, long time before you came to college and worried about majors and careers and things like that. You are not a fixed point in history. It would be a really lame life for you to be, and to be a college student now, for 6 months from now, for you to be the same person you were today. You're going to change, okay? We assume you will grow, all right? And the other piece of this is you're simply not this short story. You're always going to be more complicated. So what you write, what you put forward in a personal statement, how you're creating your narrative, it's always just going to be a snapshot. And you know what? That's okay. That's what you want. When you're applying for jobs, when you're doing this next thing, when you're writing, you want there to be more. You want someone to eventually not just see you on the piece of paper, but don't avoid the piece of paper. You've got to write things down. So in sum, I just want to tell you, there's a lot out there. There are a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot that could be complicated. But you've been given very tangible things that you can do and focus on while you're here. Write them down, make a list, prioritize. And before you do some of that stuff, I want you to take some time to reflect. So I hope you will feel a little bit better if you go through this process, and you can feel free to, if you need someone to do it with you, a big part of our office is doing that. We have a fellowship series that runs every Monday at 4 o'clock. You can find on our website, and we'd love to work with you.
Thank you, Andres. That was real talk with Andres. I like that. That was real talk. Thank you so much for that. I think we have come to the end of our time. Thank you to all of you all who have stayed in the game with us. Now know this, we're going to send we've recorded everything. We'll send an email of all of the recordings. So those of you all who still need to figure out Andres's points, which I still need to remember, I got reflect and act. I can't remember the third one, the middle one. So you'll have a chance to do that. All of the questions will be sort of cataloged, and we'll try to answer those and send you a resource packet. I want to give a shout out to Katie Densberger. I know Katie may not come out of the shadows of the tech world, but Katie Densberger is the one who put this all together for us today. So there she is. Give her a wave. There you go, Katie, over the mountain. Thank you. Now she's gone. So thank you, Katie, for all of this. So I hope today was helpful to you. I know some of you all are here because you're a part of the mid-year orientation, transfer students, first-year students who are coming back or living on grounds for the first time. There's a whole bunch of y'all here today. So if you want to participate in any other orientation events, go to the orientation website. Our schedule is listed up there. There's some other events going on for the first couple of weeks of class. Email the orientation office if you have questions about this. So staying motivated is hard, right? It's hard generally. It is really hard in the midst of all that we are experiencing today, these days. Hope that you know that it's normal and natural to feel the way that you're feeling. The struggle really is really real. We hope today, though, was just sort of a start, a boost to get you on the path of discovery, to jumpstart that curiosity. I know that always helps me. But the bottom line, if you don't think of anything or remember anything that we talked about here today, it really is that even though you may feel alone, even though it may feel like you're by yourself, you really are not alone at the University of Virginia. There's a small army of people out here waiting to help, whether it be anybody that you've seen today, your peers, your RAs. The women from OAAA mentioned all of those resources that are peer level folks who can help you. But if there's one thing to know is that this is normal and natural. We hope that this was helpful to you. You are not alone here. We're all here to help along the way. I'm just gonna wait. Katie, is there anything else I need to let the people know?
No, I think we're all set. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and we will, we'll send an email with, I've been making a list of all the stuff people wanted to know.
Yes, so we'll get that list to you. My email is tabenoch@virginia.edu. If you need to reach out to me for any particular reason, I should have put that in the chat, but it's just tabenoch@virginia. If you have questions, happy to get you to the right people. Thank you all so much and have a good rest of your day. Stay safe out there. Take it easy now. Bye.